Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to understand the role of protein and fat, but mostly protein, on a ketogenic diet. So if you're new to the keto diet, you'll probably have this conception that you shouldn't be having too much protein or you shouldn't be having too little amounts of fat. And for a lot of people, they tend to struggle with the protein concept because they think that if they have too much, it's going to make their body start dropping out of ketosis and start this process called gluconeogenesis, where the body starts using proteins as carb energy, so glucose. So basically, you don't have to worry about this, is what I will say to start off. You don't have to worry about too many proteins. However, I'm going to teach you the mechanics of what too much proteins does and what too little fats does and what higher amounts of fat do and what higher amounts of protein do. So basically, start off by saying, when it comes to understanding how protein is used on this diet, you are going to need a certain amount of protein to maintain your lean body mass, right? One thing we do know for sure is that science has shown that the second there are ketones in your blood, you are much less likely to start burning your own protein for energy. So basically, if you do eat higher fats and lower proteins, because that will create more ketones, even though ketones don't mean more fat loss, they do mean that you're going to be less likely to burn your own muscle. So it can be still a protective measure against burning your own muscle if you're only eating fat and very small amounts of protein. So you're still not at as high of a risk of burning your own muscle, even if you're not eating enough protein. However, if you were to go low fat and low protein, then you absolutely would run a higher risk of burning your own muscle. And also, you'd probably feel terrible. So higher amounts of fat are going to make you feel better on this diet. That is why a lot of people will say and mislabel the diet as a high-fat diet. It is only a high-fat diet as a byproduct of the foods you will tend to probably be eating. And the only requirement, I want to get this, you write this down, the only requirement for a ketogenic diet is a lack of carbohydrates. So cutting out carbs is the only requirement for a ketogenic diet. Fats will deepen the level of ketosis you're in, because ketosis is a spectrum. It's not a bam, you're in ketosis. It is, but then it's a matter of how deep you go into the water, right? You dive into the water, but what's your altitude? How deep are you into ketosis? And more fats are going to get you deeper. Deeper ketosis doesn't mean more fat loss, but it does mean better mental performance, better probably sport performance, and overall it'll help you get fat adapted quicker, which is a big thing. But a lot of companies will mislabel the diet as a high-fat, low-protein diet because it's an easy way for them to say, to just basically make sure you're doing a version of the keto diet that will feel good. That's kind of their shortcut. And a lot of them don't even really understand why. Myself personally, I've been doing the keto diet for 7 years. I've seen what the landscape was like before any of this marketing, bogus was around anyway. So the whole point of this diet is too much protein is not going to be an issue. It is going to lower your levels of ketones, but it's only going to lower them insofar as how much fat you've been consuming. So if you have high amounts of protein but still high amounts of fat in the day, then it's not a problem. If you have adequate amounts of fat and adequate amounts of protein, there's really a lot of leverage to move around and bounce off what your macronutrient ratios are going to be between those two. So overall, I would be more afraid of not enough protein and fat than too much of either of one. So if you have a day where you go too much fat, not enough protein, it's okay, because at the end of the day, you'll probably have higher ketones that day and have more of a muscle protective result. However, if you have too much protein, that's not going to stimulate gluconeogenesis. So what that actually is going to do is your body is going to take a certain amount of protein every single day, that same amount, and maybe that amount will increase a little bit if you're doing lots of intense exercise, but your body is going to convert a certain amount of protein to glucose every single day, and that number is going to be pretty much the same no matter what amount of protein you're intaking. So it doesn't matter if you have 150 grams of protein a day. the next day, when you have 20 grams of protein, right, which is low, your body is still going to use, that same number of protein to convert to glucose. However, if you're only having 20 grams of protein, that protein is probably going to come, the gluconeogenesis protein is probably going to come from your muscle stores and a little bit of the protein you ate, but 20 grams is very low. So that's kind of the downfall of going too low on protein. Your body can only get so far with the protective effects of ketosis on your muscles. So in general, don't be afraid of too much protein. Do be afraid of very low fats, but you don't have to go very high fat and you don't have to go very low protein. Those things are just going to facilitate higher ketone levels. And at the end of the day, all of the research on this diet most of it comes from studies in the 1920s and 30s on epileptic children who needed very high levels of ketones in order to not have seizures. This is not the case for fat loss. This is just something that's going to make you feel better, and overall, yeah, it'll probably improve performance if you go very high fat, but you'd still need good enough protein in very athletic people. At the end of the day, it's just an easy way for marketers to recommend these things. I concern myself more so with the insulin effects of protein. So the insulinogenic effects of protein are something you actually should concern yourself with over the total quantity of protein you're taking in the day. So it's more about the quality of protein than the quantity, because if you're having whey protein, which is good and it has its place on a keto diet, but if you have just a random one shake of whey protein in the day, and then that's your whole meal, whey protein is a very high insulin response. So that's why I have a video on whey protein on keto, because if you have whey protein on its own randomly in the day, that insulin response is going to spike, and it tends to have a longer lasting power for a couple hours, like an hour or so after. So basically, if you mix macronutrients together during the same meal, so if you have if you get your protein, if you get 30 grams of protein from eggs, which have a good amount of fat in them, compared to 30 grams of protein from a whey protein shake, your insulin response is going to be much more stable and much less volatile and much quicker in your body, because eggs especially digest pretty quickly, especially if they're raw. And at the end of the day, all you need to consider is the quality of protein rather than the quantity, because at the end of the day, eat the quantity of protein that feels good for your body, but make sure you're spacing out high insulinogenic protein. So if you're having whey protein shakes, which is for the most part the most insulinogenic protein source, anytime you mix protein that's high insulin, mix it with fatty sources. So if you're gonna have a whey protein shake like I am actually here, I have this with a couple raw eggs in here, and I also had a canned cod liver at the same time, which is very high in fat. So mixing those macronutrients is going to shorten and curb the insulin response, so it's much less of a loss of fat burning. Because the whole reason you want to avoid this insulin thing is because when insulin is raised, you're unable to burn fat, basically. So all you need to do is just make sure you're mixing your proteins with fat sources, and a lot of natural proteins in nature tend to have fat mixed in with them, and that slows the digestion and lowers the insulin response. So mix those macros together. Don't be afraid of having more protein than 20%, because you can go as high as to 40-45%, and for me, my protein intake is always around between 20 to 45 every day, and from there the fats will be bouncing off of that. Either way, hope this video was informative to you. Thank you for watching. My name is Anthony Romano. Peace.